For one final time this season of college football, welcome into Breakdown, everybody. Final episode of Season 1, and it's going to wrap up talking about what's coming up this Monday, hopefully. Alabama, Ohio State, the national championship. Number 1 versus number 3. The Heisman Trophy winner, Devontae Smith, versus the flaming hot Trey Sermon. We got storylines coming in everywhere. The number 3 seed has never won a national championship game in this college football playoff format. We know Ohio State likes to be the first. They were the first college football playoff champion, and they won it as a 4 seed. So it's a team you can't doubt. They're going to come in there. They're going to put in their best effort. Alabama has to be cautious. We know Nick Saban's going to prepare. It's not going to be oh man, we're surprised the 3 seed came into play. It's not going to be like that. Saban's going to be ready. Ryan Day's going to be ready. And we're going to have a fantastic finale to what's been just a crazy season for Buckeye fans and college sports fans in general. But there is some issues coming up with this game. Ohio State is having a massive COVID outbreak, apparently. The SEC, Ohio State, and Alabama, they've all said, hey, we want to play this game. Come Monday, we're going out on the field. But the Big Ten is attempting to have the game postponed in order for Ohio State to have its best players available. Whether or not they would actually be able to be available at any point is really kind of unknown. And in the situation, do they really even need to? Ohio State has played multiple times this season without their best players. I mean, they were out 24 against Michigan State. In no way am I comparing Michigan State to Alabama. But this team knows how to go out there and prepare, not knowing what's coming this following Saturday, or in this case, this coming Monday. I mean, the Buckeyes just beat Clemson in the Sugar Bowl playoff semifinal without defensive end Zach Harrison and left guard Harry Miller. They faced one of the best D-lines in the country at Clemson without their starting left guard, and still were just fine. Justin Fields wasn't under pressure most of the game. Speaking of Justin Fields, he's saying he will be good to go, although I still have a few question marks that I'll get to here in a little bit. But this should be a great matchup. Ryan Day came out and said, hey, we want to play this game Monday. We're going to go out there with whoever we have left and put on our best performance and just go out there and compete. That's what they do. It's college football. You never know what you're going to get. You got to go out there and just do what you got to do with who you got. And that's what Ryan Day's attitude is. So let's start getting into this game. Let's break it down, as some might say. Alabama, great defense this season. 10 of its 12 games, Bama's held its opponent to 24 points or fewer. But in 7 of its last games, Alabama's held opponents to 17 points or fewer, including 2 games which had allowed just 3 points to Kentucky and Arkansas, and 1 in which it allowed 0 to Mississippi State. Now, that's not in any sort of comparison to an Ohio State offense, because none of those teams they faced ranked top 25 in any offensive categories. It has actually faced 2 teams that ranked in the top 10 nationally in scoring offense and top 14 nationally in total offense, and those games were completely different. They allowed 48 points against Ole Miss and 46 against Florida. So everybody thinking that this Bama defense is going to come in and absolutely clamp up Ohio State, you couldn't be more wrong. It's still possible Ohio State could struggle in this game, but a lot of people are saying, oh man, it's going to be a 24-point blowout. It's very unlikely that will be the case, especially with the way a lot of these Ohio State games have been going in the past 2 weeks. The Clemson game ended up being a lot of scoring in it, but for most of it was a very tight game until Ohio State started pulling away. But then if you even look at just the points Clemson scored, it's not like they were scoring a ton of points. Then you go back to the Northwestern game. Northwestern didn't score that many points. So Buckeyes haven't allowed a lot of points in recent weeks. They do in the first half. Ohio State this season has shown that they're a second half team, which doesn't bode well for the national championship game. You have to come out there and compete for the entirety of the game, not just one half of it. They were able to pull it together for Clemson. Fantastic performance by them. But like Alabama destroyed Notre Dame for 4 quarters of football. So that's something to look out for. Can Ohio State stay strong the whole game? Can they stay hot? Because they have to stay hot in order to keep up with Alabama's offense. But they should be able to, considering Bama really hasn't had to face good offenses, and when they have, they put up 40-plus points. They won both of those games. but it's something Ohio State can look to take advantage of. Hey, we can probably take advantage of some deep routes, and once we get that defense stretched out, we can start running the ball. Running the ball is going to be the key to victory, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. But I want to talk about Alabama's offense, one of the best in the country, headlined by the incredible trio of Najee Harris, Mac Jones, and Heisman Trophy winner, first-time wide receiver has won it since '91 with Desmond Howard, Devontae Smith. This guy, I mean, all three of these guys, potential first-rounders. No doubt Devontae Smith and Mac Jones will be. The only reason I say maybe on the Najee Harris, he should be a first-round pick, but we know sometimes running backs kind of fall to early second with the way things were. I mean, go back to last season. There was 3 guys that could have been taken in the first round, and they all fell to the second. So who even knows what teams are doing right now with running backs? We'll talk about NFL Draft on podcast coming up in months to come. Sean Wade said he wants to guard Devontae Smith all game long. That's a bold move. I mean, we'll have to see how that one pays off, because Devontae Smith is awesome. I mean, you're watching this guy, he's putting up numbers we just don't see very often from wide receivers, and he's burned just about everybody. Frankly, the Buckeyes probably are going to have to double team him on a lot of downfield routes, so when, Sean Wade's covering him, everyone else is going to have to really step up. The linebackers are going to have to do so much in the passing game, which then opens up the room for Najee Harris to run it. It's going to be a very hard scheme to stop here, because there's so many weapons that Bama can go to. Granted, if you go back to the last time these two teams played, I know it was 5 years ago at this point, but going back to when they last played, the wide receivers for Bama then were incredible. They didn't have the quarterback that could throw to them very well. Now they do. So you can't really go back to this game too much and compare, oh, well, the Buckeyes defense stopped the last time. This is completely different offense that we're seeing right now for Alabama. Alabama this season has just been incredible, and Ohio State secondary has to lock down. Anytime Smith is going deep on a route, the safeties cannot fall apart. The safeties first have to locate him. One of them has to go to stick to his side of the field, make sure he's in a double coverage. The other safety at that point has to patrol the entire rest of the field. You're basically running one safety and having a safety in a corner on Devontae Smith. That's just what they're going to have to do throughout this entire game to make sure that guy doesn't get locked down. Then guys like Sevyn Banks are going to have to lock down the other receivers as much as possible. None of these receivers are bad. It's still Alabama, and we don't know the status currently of Jalen Waddle. If he's back, that's probably the guy Sevyn Banks will be on the entire game, and that will be a great matchup. It's matchups like these you got to wonder, because Jalen Waddle, there's speculation he'll be back. It's looking like he's going to be back, but we don't know how much he's actually going to be able to play. Most likely he'll be dressed on the sidelines, but how much he plays probably depends on if this game gets postponed. Because if it gets postponed and we go to the next Monday, then we definitely see a Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith wide receiver duo, along with everybody else on this offense. It's an incredible offense that I don't think some people understand is going to be extremely hard to stop, especially with the way the Buckeyes secondary has struggled this season. They need to start putting Mac Jones in pressure quickly so that they can't get the ball downfield. Force them to either run the football, where your linebackers, for one, so Ohio State's linebackers are probably the best part of the secondary unit behind that defensive line. Normally we're saying, oh my God, it's the linebackers. They can't do anything. But now it seems to be this season, hey, the linebackers are there. They got the senior leadership. Hilliard has been really stepping it up. Tuff Borland was was the defensive player of the game against Clemson, which is kind of questionable. And then Pete Warner back there as well. I mean, these 3 guys really leading this part of the offense. They're the brains of the operation out there on the field. They've done a great job, but now the secondary kind of struggles. But in the D line for Ohio State has looked really good in recent weeks. I mean, they had Trevor Lawrence under pressure all night long in the Sugar Bowl. They had sacks. I think it was the most sacks Trevor Lawrence has had in a game that he's played. Ohio State really brought some pressure, some different looks that nobody really seen from them before. I think it was Baron Browning got in the backfield a dozen times. So expect a lot of edge rushing to come off of that. But they have to get Mac Jones under pressure, and that may not even be enough to stop somebody of his caliber. It was to stop Trevor Lawrence somewhat. He still had a decent game. And you don't bet, if you're a betting man, you're not betting on Trevor Lawrence having a bad game very often. If you're a betting man, you're not betting on Mac Jones having a bad game very often. These are the type of players we're talking about. They're future NFL quarterbacks, or NFL prospects at least, and they were top recruits out of high school. There's a reason that they're top recruits. There's a reason that they're NFL prospects. From the moment they step on campus, they don't have bad games often, and you don't ever bet on them having a bad game. Now, moving over to the Buckeye side of the ball. They have a very good offense, but the Justin Fields injury becomes the biggest question mark in this one. Those ribs, we don't even know what the injury was. They didn't tell him immediately on the sideline either when it happened. They gave him a shot. He went back out there and played the rest of the game. And Ohio State hasn't released what the injury was. It could be cracked ribs. It could be bruised ribs. It could just be he got the wind knocked out of him and he was having some muscle strains for the rest of the game. We don't really know. He might come out of this game and start really hot, but every time you see someone coming in with the injury, they start off, they're phenomenal. Then they get that hit. Boom. One hit, and they start becoming cautious. He might become overly cautious, probably won't want to leave the pocket. And the more he stays in the pocket, the more likely he is to get sacked. He tends to hold on to the ball a little bit longer than a lot of quarterbacks and probably NFL teams would want you to do. And probably more than Ryan Day wants him to do as well. But the more he stands in that pocket, the more he's getting sacked, the more likely he is going to be holding on to this ball. If Alabama's defense has to lock up these receivers, maybe come out there in a zone look and kind of just fill the zones and just give enough time for your defense to collapse in on that pocket and force Justin Fields to make the decision. Because once you get him in that situation where you've hurt his ribs once more, I'm not saying that they're not headhunting Justin Fields, but as a linebacker, a defensive end, or a defensive lineman, hey man, if I get one good hit on this guy, he might start getting a little shaken in his boots. I might get in his head a little bit. And that's a big thing. Mentality in these games is the biggest part of it. You can game plan and strategy all week long. And once you get on that game field, though, once you get out there, all that goes away. I mean, you know what you got to do, but can you stay out of your own head? Can you go do what you've trained to do? And can you go win this football game? But Justin Fields, when he holds onto that ball too long, that's when he tends to be most inaccurate. When he gets that thing out in 3 seconds, the guy's completion percentage is through the roof. When he doesn't, when he holds on to that football, that's where all of his picks have come from. When he holds on to it and he's looking too much, when he starts overthinking back there in the pocket, something he's tended to do a lot in these past 3-4 games, going back to the Indiana performance where he had the 3 interceptions. Going back to then, it's when he holds on to this thing too long, something he's done a few times this season, he throws that ball terribly inaccurate. It gets picked off. He's in his own head about it. That's something he can't do. The biggest part of this Ohio State offense for this game, though, it's got to be Trey Sermon. He has to have another big game, and I know it's so much pressure to put on one guy, but it's just like Ezekiel Elliott the last time Ohio State and Alabama went. In order to win the game, they need to win by running the football. It's the Big Ten style of football that won Ohio State's last title with Urban Meyer in 2014 with the third-string quarterback. Quarterback play in this game doesn't have to be the deciding factor. It could be Justin Fields can come out there and play just as we think he will, or could, and blow this thing apart, and this will be a competitive game. But in the situation I was just talking about, if Justin Fields' injury becomes too much at some point, and maybe they have to go to one of those backups like CJ Stroud, the entire offense switched to, all right, Trey Sermon, go win us a football game. The Buckeyes have had the offensive line. Sermon has had the past few games where he's been on fire. He's having a similar postseason stretch, kind of like Zeke did back in 2014. And in reality, Trey Sermon has been what has pushed Ohio State to this national championship game. Because that Big Ten championship game, we couldn't throw the football. Ohio State couldn't throw the football. I'm an Ohio State fan. They couldn't throw the football. And it was Trey Sermon who led the attack on the ground, put up the most single game rushing yards in Ohio State single game history in a phenomenal performance. Then he ran all over Clemson, and he has to come out there. He just has to stay hot. That's Ohio State's offense. It's Big Ten football. It's how this works. I think everybody that's coming into this game knows if Trey Sermon is hot, it becomes infinitely more harder for Alabama to win this football game. They have to lock him down. So they're in a similar situation Ohio State's defense is. How are you preparing for one of the best offenses in the country? And it becomes it becomes a matchup more between Nick Saban and Ryan Day. How are these two coaches? One, in Nick Saban, one of the greatest coaches of all time, now has 3 Heisman Trophy winners to his resume in the past, 15 years. The guy has more Heisman trophies than Michigan has wins over Ohio State. I mean, it's incredible. Granted, it's not hard to do. But so Nick Saban, he's one of the best brains in college football. Now we have Ryan Day, the up-and-comer, the guy who's only got 1 loss on his entire resume, and it was to Clemson last year in the semifinals in a game that really could have gone either way. There was a few opportunities missed. We won't get into that one. But Ryan Day, he's an up-and-coming head coach. We don't really know what the future holds for him, besides the fact that at the moment, it's looking pretty bright. His recruiting has been phenomenal, but a lot of these players are still Urban Meyer's guys that he didn't bring in. So, I mean, we still don't know what Ryan Day really has to offer, besides the fact that he can go out there and win football games. He's shown he's a great halftime adjustment head coach, which is something Ohio State desperately needs to have, because sometimes they just come out flat, and they need that guy that can come up in halftime and be like, yo, let's restart this, come on. And that's been Ryan Day so far this season, and last season, the guy hasn't lost a regular season game yet. So, I mean, he's shown he can run up the scoreboard. His offenses have been incredible in the past 2 years. So it becomes Ryan Day versus Nick Saban. It's going to be the best matchup, and probably a matchup, frankly, we're going to be seeing for years to come. I mean, unless Nick Saban decides to retire in the next 2 years, I'm expecting more Ryan Day versus Nick Saban. And actually, if we're going down the line even further, I believe Ohio State and Bama have a home schedule regular season game for, I think it's 2025 and 2026. I'm not 100% sure on the dates, but I think it's 2025, 26, 27, somewhere in that region. So regular season matchup between Ohio State and Bama is huge for these two schools. And really, frankly, it's huge for all of college football. Now, we've never seen, in at least the recent years, unless it's in conference games, of these perennial powerhouses actually meeting up. It's something we see all the time in college basketball, but it doesn't happen very often in college football. I mean, we're talking 5 years down the line, though. So are both of these teams still going to be good? If Nick Saban retires, are they going to have a fall off? If Ryan Day goes to the NFL, will Ohio State have a fall off? Who will come back? I mean, there's a lot of question marks coming up, but this game, the national championship game, is going to be one for the ages, and I guarantee it. Everyone's saying it's going to be a 25-point blowout. How about you go put your life savings on the line if you believe that so much, because I guarantee you'll lose it all, because this game is going to be one that comes down to the wire. It's going to be intense. Neither one of these head coaches get blown out. It doesn't happen. Ryan Day's 1 loss is a 1-possession game to a Clemson team that was phenomenal. Nick Saban, that guy doesn't get blown out. The only sort of blowout was still a 1-possession game. I'll say postseason blowout was still a 1-possession game against Ohio State in the 2015-14 playoffs. He's not a guy that gets blown out. These are two great coaches that know how to stick in a football game. That's what's happening. The players are going to go out there and play to their max potential. There's so much similarities between the teams and their potentials and how many guys they'll get in the draft. I mean, you look at both of these sides, there's possibilities every single player we look at is going to the draft. It's insane to think just how much of the NFL we're watching right now. So it becomes head coach versus head coach. What can your coordinators do as well? Ohio State and, actually, Sarkisian, the OC for Alabama, has just accepted a job down in Texas. We'll see how that affects the offense and the mindset going into this game. Obviously, he'll probably be coaching this game, but you got to be thinking at the same time, 1, do the players now have a distrust in this guy? And 2, how will his mindset be in it? Because that's also a big storyline you got to start looking at is, well, I mean, this guy just said he's not committed to you anymore. He's leaving. He's taking a job in a different state at a school that historically has been competitive with you. He's going to start taking recruiting from the South. He now has all those plugs in Alabama and Florida in all these areas. It becomes an area like, well, maybe the players now have a distrust. Maybe the other coaches have a distrust. Nick Saban has dominated his coordinators outside of Alabama when they've left. interesting to see. Maybe he starts taking away the play calling from him and just takes control of the offense. Does their offense change up now because of it? There are so many things that can go into this game that, frankly, I don't think we have time for. But this national championship game coming up on Monday should be a phenomenal one, and one we're all waiting forward to. But this is the final episode of Breakdown for Season 1, College Football Edition, basically. It's been a great year with all of you. Thank you all for sticking with us and keeping the views up. We have so many more videos coming out, podcast-wise, so make sure to stay tuned. Uploading schedule is going to be a little bit different here. We are college students, so our schedules are kicking back up. We have classes starting the same day as the national championship, but we actually are recording a podcast on the Monday of the national championship, which I will upload the Ohio State and Bama segment that we obviously will do on Monday. I already have everything set and made for it. We just have to actually record it. That'll be up Monday, and then the rest of the podcast, well, actually, I'll release the entire podcast on Anchor on Monday as well, and then the rest of the podcast will be uploaded throughout the week in split up segments. But obviously, if you want to go watch the full thing, go check it out on Anchor.fm. You can find the links in all our websites. It's everywhere. Or if you can't find it, just type in Casual Sports Report. It pops up eventually. Thank you all for sticking with us. We have so much more, and thank you for 1 year of doing this. We'll be back next season.